13 people. It's Matt Griswold from Minnesota. Wait, camera's there, right? Okay. There's the KFI logo. Thank you. Yeah, I have a blast up there. Took the dogs up there. My daughter and I went up there. So if you haven't seen that video, it's it was put up yesterday. And it is me at Carrizo Plain, me, my daughter, and the dogs at Carrizo Plain, which is BLM land. It's Bureau of Land Management land. So if you know your BLM, then you know that you get out there, and unless it is literal, unless it's marked no camping or no off-road vehicles or whatever, you can camp there. You can camp anywhere. You do need a California campfire permit, but you get those online. You get them. You watch a 2-minute video on how to put out a fucking fire to the California standard. And their RVs are fine. The only thing allowed into Carrizo Plain are street legal vehicles. No OHVs. You cannot rip around on a quad runner. So you can only take street legal vehicles. So if you can get an RV in there, then go ahead. I recommend, like I've got a Suburban. I take this Suburban everywhere, and it's not even raised. But the roads they're dry and packed. They're dirt roads. I mean, literally 2-channel dirt roads with a big median of green grass in the middle. I would not. I mean, I don't know where you live, but I mean, if you're in the LA area, not Orange County, but if you're in the LA area, you can be up at Carrizo Plain in about 2.5 hours. From my house, it's an hour and a half. But you go through Grapevine, get on I-5, exit 166 to Maricopa. You know, it's super easy, super easy. I think I'll play a old school intro.
ISIL is not going to pose an. From Texas to California. ISIL is not going to pose an existential threat to us. You know, the American people should feel confident that we have a good holiday season.
Oh my God. called a guy named Bubba who wouldn't tell me anything.
No Bubba's here, ma'am. Just professional plumbers who show up on time, smell good, and unplug. 1-800-446.
All right.
Contact your license number 399170. SoCal weather from JFI. We're going to see lows in the 50s. Warmer temperatures, highs
All right. For a second, I thought I forgot my headphones. For a second, I thought I forgot my headphones. I was sharding.
I would bomb the shit out of him.
Who's Owen Benjamin? That name is familiar. How do I know that?
With Brian Sears on KFI.
KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place Live. Brian Suits in here till 11 o'clock. With the world melting down on the Gaza-Israeli border, as I predicted, as I said on Thursday with Bill Handel on Tactical Thursday. On Thursday morning, I said, by Saturday, you will be hearing of Palestinian boys who Hamas pushed out there for the purpose of being killed, threatening the lives of Israeli soldiers, throwing rocks or whatever. They'll be dead. And we have two and counting. Two 17-year-olds and counting. We'll get to that because Hamas is a shakedown organ. They're a blackmail organization. They're not a real government. But anyway, if you want to keep buying mainstream media's BS on that, go ahead. But the Truth Zone is coming up soon. We're going to have a frank talking Truth Zone about California's magazine ban and then LAPD Chief Moore's decision publicly to announce that he's going to rescind legally held concealed carry permits by a total of, I want to say, like 24 people who've had them since 1994. And boy, what a crime spree they've been on, eh? And so, I mean, he's disproving his own point. And it's, if I lived in LA, I would give more of a rat's rectum. But Los Angeles chased the last gun shop out of LA. The last legal, and by the way, just to remind all of you that it is legal, even in California, to purchase firearms. Yep. I mean, they don't look like anything you'd buy in Nevada or Utah, but the point is, and they don't go pew-pew as many times in a row. Or do they? Well, we'll get to that here in a second. But the chief of police of LAPD, a non-elected position, has done something that is, of course, amazingly politically correct in LA. And he's taken those pesky concealed carry permits out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. I mean, what a great use of his time. What a complete. And I didn't waste his time by requesting him to come on, not even on this show, but tomorrow night on Super Hyper Local, which Airfingers is a news show. But I'm not wasting his time or mine. So I didn't even ask because he's not going to come on. He's not going to be accountable to KFI. Certainly not Dark Secret Place listeners. Neither did what's his name, McDonald, the prior Sheriff Beltbuckle, who I'm not a big fan of this new guy Villanueva, but the number one thing I like about him is that he's not McConnell. So there's that. You know what happened up on the 14? I haven't heard us talking about it, but there was a pursuit. A parolee got into what the sheriff's department calls a caper in Santa Clarita. Around 2:30 this afternoon, 2:30 or 3, drove north on the 14, CHP in pursuit. And somewhere past Acton, there was a collision with the CHP pursuing vehicle, airbag deployed. And as LA Sheriff's Department said, the quote, chippy, close quote, was had to be medevaced. And the dirtbag kept running in a Ford F-250 down Sierra Highway. He fled on foot and was handcuffed and detained by deputies who caught him on foot. And then he proceeded to swear on the scanner. As deputies were keying their mics and giving their various updates, the guy was swearing. So anyway, I haven't heard that on the news yet, but I'm curious as to the condition of the CHP officer, but didn't sound ultra serious, but they did medevac a CHP officer. Airbag deployment in the collision. So we'll see if we get updates on that. And before I get just too excited about what happened in a U.S. District Court, for all of you legal high capacity magazine owners, an update. But first, I have to play this quick history quiz. The congressperson on MSNBC, just about what are we saying here? About an hour and a half ago. The youngest congressperson in the current U.S. Congress, displaying her historic acumen, talking about the 22nd Amendment. So if you can spot the flaw in what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is about to say, you can go ahead, be the first at Dark Secret Place on the tweeter machine. That way we'll know it's fair. If you can spot the flaw in what she says in her history here, tweet it at Dark Secret Place, and you will win praise and inner peace. So again, here's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about why FDR never got a fifth term.
When our party was boldest, the time of the New Deal, the Great Society, the Civil Rights Act, and so on, we had and carried supermajorities in the House, in the Senate. We carried the presidency. They had to amend the Constitution of the United States to make sure Roosevelt did not get reelected. And there were so many extraordinary things that were happening in that time that were united.
Now, I don't want to telegraph my hint here, but I'm going to set it back to the phrase that pays.
In the House, in the Senate, we carried the presidency. They had to amend the Constitution of the United States to make sure Roosevelt did not get reelected. And there was
okay. So if you know history, here's our quiz. If you know history better than AOC, then you can tweet the answer at Dark Secret Place on the Twitter machine. A little later on, it has been described, and most scholars of special operations and unconventional warfare agree that this one thing that happened in 1942 goes down as probably the most successful commando raid of all time for several reasons, and I'll walk you through what that was, because there are many, many lessons for today as well as tomorrow. And so we'll take an early break when we come back. Yeah, you know all those 30-round magazines that you mailed to your cousin out of state? Yeah, I did too. Well, hey, it's not what he can. All my cousins are in Canada, though. That's a joke. They'd be in prison. And so I'll tell you why it might be a new day in California. Some Gavin pushback on this one. For all of you who are residents of the city of Los Angeles, I can't help you. I cannot help you. This chief has, and if you're the ones with the concealed carry permit, don't worry. The chief says that modern technology makes your ability to defend yourself obsolete. You see, you could pull a legally concealed handgun and defend yourself. There's no need if you have a Galaxy 10 Note. That's literally what he's saying. And unless he means that you can jab somebody with the little stylus that comes with it. I'm not sure, but yeah. Selfie, strobe. When we come back, yes, the future of the 30-round magazine in California. That more coming up. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suit's in here. Also streaming at Dark Secret Place. But I'm not at Dark Secret Place, but on YouTube. Go to unsheepyourself.com, unsheepyourself.com, and you can be part of the live stream. And during commercials and stuff, I answer questions. And I drop F-bombs, KFI, AM640, more stimulating talk. Here's Michael F-bomb Chappé with the news.
Two men got into a fight in the parking lot.
Well, nice coming up right now.
Oh, yeah. He's correct. FDR died in 1945. The 22nd Amendment was 47. Hey, you, it's me, Brian Suits here for SolarMax. You may have heard that the utility companies recently stopped their solar rebate programs right after they murdered about 85 people up in Northern California. However, SolarMax technology is so committed to making solar affordable for everyone, they're making up for the lost utility savings with their own Solar for All rebate. Through the end of March, SolarMax's Solar for All rebate, combined with federal tax incentives, gives you one last chance to get historic savings up to 35%. That could save you an average of up to $7,500 off your solar energy system. SolarMax can make this offer because they're the only solar company doing their own financing in-house, plus they do everything themselves. From installation, world-class roofers, panel assembly. Oh yeah, they make the panels in Riverside. They don't take a truck down to Long Beach and crack open a Connex. They make them in America. You get maximum savings like I did with my SolarMax system. Today was a banner day for putting power back on the grid, by the way. Don't miss your chance to save up to $7,500 on solar. Reserve your rebate now. Solar for All expires at the end of March. Dial pound 250 on your cell phone now. Say keyword SolarMax, pound 250 SolarMax, or visit solarmaxtech.com. DM me on Dark Secret Place at Twitter, and I might give you a number for a guy that will guarantee that you will get March savings before the end of March. Subject to credit approval, CSLB number 9722048.
Tonight, lows dropping down to the 50s. Tomorrow, sunny, warmer, 70s, 70s, and upper 80s.
So yeah, the moon thing, yes, is good.
Vehicle off the race over, emergency crews are on the scene, blocking the right lanes. Traffic can be jammed all the way back to 118. The 118 east is slow from Glen Oaks Boulevard on 210. And the Sepulveda Pass, 405 north at Getty Center Drive. Still got a car fire off to the right shoulder. Traffic slows back to 10. Southbound side is slow from Mulholland Drive to Getty Center. In Lincoln Heights, the 5 north before the 110. A broken down car blocking the left lane. Traffic slows back to the 10. And in Commerce, on the 710 north before the 5, crash block in the left lane. It's going to be jammed up all the way back to Atlantic Boulevard. KFI traffic is sponsored by the Ad Council. KFI.
One in 3 adults has prediabetes, but with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. That's doihaveprediabetes.org.
Has anyone guessed it? Yeah, so FDR died in 1945, and the 22nd Amendment came in 1947. So AOC, the case she was making was, Democrats have been super majorities in the past, and all that. She's wrong. She's just flat out wrong about Congress during FDR's presidency, and all that. FDR tried to pack the Supreme Court, and he was blocked by Republicans. If he had a super majority, he could do that. It was the beginning of his 4th term. He won the 44 presidential election with Harry Truman, and was just starting his 4th term. Because you may not know this, but if you read, it is now because of the 22nd Amendment. A president can only be president for 2 terms, but there was no term limit for president until 1947. FDR had died. AOC was claiming that they had a supermajority, but somehow the Republicans passed the 22nd Amendment to prevent FDR from running. She's retarded. But if you don't know this, the U.S. Constitution actually does not specify how many judges are on the Supreme Court. It does not. It doesn't say 9. It doesn't say 7, doesn't say 9, doesn't say 28. But FDR tried to pack the court with a bunch of liberal judges, and he was blocked by Republicans. So I mean, it's bizarre that she's sitting here on the one hand saying that we've had super majorities in the past. If you had a fucking super majority, the United States would have been a dictatorship by 1938.
Can be your favorite promotion this month. Just earn 500 points on your rewards card and you can win instantly. Or collect the game pieces to win great prizes.
Number 2.
Speaking of hitting the hay, better than that. Stay in buffet. A buffet for two, plus a canyon view room, starting at $109.
Just getting a quote from Mercury Insurance.
Analysis complete. Here's what you. Sun's out. Today.
Morongo Casino Resort and Spa. Morongo. Good times.
I'm Megan. That's my neighbor on her.
How much time?
Introducing Pillow from Facebook. Smart hands-free video calling that makes you feel like you're in the same room, even when you're miles apart. Portal features smart cameras and smart wherever you move.
I don't understand the obsession with AOC either. She's a single congressperson who will be lucky to get reelected.
Alexa to play all your favorite music.
And her own party,
Alexa, play.
are freezing her out.
Can't be there. Feel there.
And the only thing that she has going, but don't underestimate the power of attractive and young.
Stomach issues. For me, it's intense gas, or pain, or diarrhea, sometimes all at once, over and over.
I spent years with the symptoms, but could never figure it out. No matter what I did, they never went away. So I decided to break it down for my doctor and get really specific about my symptoms.
We discovered that exocrine deficiency, or EPI, may be the reason for my stomach issues.
EPI is caused by my pancreas. Gas, bloating, stomach pain, unexplained weight loss, and oily stools. The symptoms just don't go away.
But EPI can show up with even one symptom.
The good news? EPI is manageable. But to get to the right diagnosis, you have to break it down for your doctor and get specific about the severity.
I'm playing the Happy Mondays
EPI.com to learn more.
cover of Staying Alive.
Change the conversation with your doctor. Brought to you by
Official rules and more information about contests on this station, go to KFIAM640.com/rules.
Looking for new windows? Search AmericanVisionWindows.com.
What would you do?
How does this end?
I would buy 14 7-layer burritos.
No, I mean, how does it end?
Look, all you gotta do is send a text. So it's between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m. for your chance to win a on KFI.
I have to turn it down or else YouTube nails me for a copyright violation, NASCAP violation. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. The Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until 11. That ain't the Bee Gees. No, those are the Happy Mondays. Now defunct group. Well, let's clean up the table first. Again, AOC from a few hours ago on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman from the Bronxland or wherever she's from, telling us all about how the Democrats had a super majority in the 30s during FDR's various terms. They had a super duper majority, but that somehow that conniving GOP managed to amend the Constitution to prevent him from having a third term. Now, any of you with a room temperature IQ who paid attention during U.S. history, especially those significant 30s and 40s, should know the right answer. But again, let's let her set up our query. Somebody did a full-on snort there. I haven't quite. I don't know if they caught her mistake or if they really had a snot locker. Wait. Probably Jake Tapper. All right. So anyway, let me check. I haven't checked the tweeter. I know that on the live stream somebody did get it right, and I forgot to see their name, and they're not eligible. But let's see if someone got it right. What was her mistake? There, I see. Alan says breathtaking ignorance, as Dave would say. It just continues. I'm surprised she did not stay. Did anyone get it? Ah, here we go. Wayne Lyon. This is the first one that I'm seeing. Wayne Lyon, at Wayne Lyon 22. He got it correct. FDR died in the first year of his fourth term before the end of World War II. Not possible for him to have had a fifth term. Wayne, you are correct. What AOC apparently never knew is that Roosevelt was elected in November 1944. He began his fourth term, of course, in January of 45. He died a few months later. The 22nd Amendment stipulating or limiting a president's terms to 2 consecutive terms. That was not in the U.S. Constitution. That wasn't law until 1947. So I'm not making myself the AOC ombudsman. I'm just saying that if you're running for Congress and that's your mastery of American history, then you really have a problem. She also seems to have a lack of grasp of when Democrats had what she's calling a supermajority during the Great Society and the Civil Rights Movement and all that. Because here's the comedy. And again, I'm not I'm not going to sit here lecturing a minority about the Civil Rights Movement, but Democrats were the ones blocking that. Okay. In fact, the Democrat majority is what delayed civil rights. So there is that. All right. And those kids, by the way, Muhammad, Sidney Clayton, and Jagdish know more individually about American history, apparently, than she does. Well, it is to a San Diego federal courtroom that I take you. Judge Roger Benitez on Friday declared unconstitutional a key provision of California's Prop 63 that banned possession of high-capacity gun magazines often used in mass shootings, ensuring that the voter-approved prohibition will remain tied up in court for some time to come. Judge Roger Benitez wrote in his 86-page decision upholding a lawsuit against the proposed ban of magazines holding more than 10 rounds that such a statute, quote, hits at the center of the Second Amendment and its burden is severe, close quote. The case that was, I forget, someone versus Becerra. What happened was that a woman and her husband, there was a home invasion. These guys came in. They were shooting. She fired and missed, and she expended her 10 rounds before she could have lethal effect. And even though it's a handgun, she should have, in a normal world, had 18-round magazines, for instance, or whatever she wanted. But the lawsuit alleged that death and severe injury occurred because of California's ban on the amount of rounds someone can have in a magazine. And the judge upheld it. It took a circuitous route. It bounced off the Ninth Circuit Court, and they kicked it back to him. California, Javier Becerra, will undoubtedly appeal this, and it'll go back to the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. But eventually, it's going to get to the Supreme Court. And this is kind of our problem here in California, is that a lot of the Democrat gun grabs are predicated on this taking a long, long time. Probably not for this time. But anyway, more on this in just a second. What does it mean for ye? That and more coming up right after this. Dark Secret Place. Brian sits in here until 11 o'clock. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
cents. That's the highest we've seen since November 19th. Gas prices have gone up 31 cents a gallon over the last 20 days of increases. COC is $3.62 a gallon right now on average, $3.57 in the Inland Empire. The Auto Club says the rising prices are tied to lower supplies caused by shutdowns.
The magazine that I carried in Iraq, I carried a 40. I carried a 40 with 36 rounds of tracer in it. Because I had to direct my gunners. I directed my machine gunners with my tracer. And then the rest were all Israeli 30s. I have some of those Surefire 60s, which of course aren't legal in California, which is why I don't have them in California, because that would be illegal. But we'll see how they are now. And here's how I feel about handguns. If I had to have a single gun to defend my life, it would be a 1911 with a 7-round magazine and one in the chamber. But since I don't have to have that, I can have a Springfield XDS in 45 with a 10-round mag plus one. Or I can have a bigger 45 with a 14, 15, or 16-round mag. But if you absolutely positively said, you know, you can have one gun, it would be a 1911 because I trained on it. The Springfield XDS, of course, is not available in California. You can buy them out of state and bring them in. Because I highly recommend that if you get a handgun for home defense, you train like a motherfucker. You train and train and train and train. You train until you can't get it wrong. And you don't train at a well-lit range. You go to a range that allows you to train realistically with the lights off, your eyes used to the darkness, and then no hearing protection. Because if you use a gun for home self-defense and it's after 7 p.m., here's the problem. If you've never done it before, you might be shocked. But when you fire a handgun in a hallway or even a bedroom, and you don't have hearing protection, the first round will shock and blind you, and it'll deafen you, unless you have trained to use the weapon in that scenario. Because if you know what's coming, even a 22 is deafening loud. If you know what's coming, if you know the blindness, and you know that your ear's going to be ringing, then you can continue operating. The first time you ever do it, first time I've ever had someone do it, they are shocked. But as long as you train realistically, which means at a dimly lit range with maybe one of your earmuffs off, if they're going to kick you off for taking them both off, then whatever. But you have to understand that a gun at an open air range has a way different sound than a gun fired in your bedroom or in your living room or whatever. So unless you're prepared to train realistically, don't do it. I mean, in other words, if you want to guarantee a better outcome, just train. If you just go out and someone shows you how to operate it and reload it, then you might be more of a liability to the rest of your family. But that's my little op-ed. I mean, I was trained by Tom, Angry Tom Bigley, who we've had as a guest for a decade here on Dark Secret Place. And his mantra is amateurs train till they get it right, pros train till they can't get it wrong. You know, and granted, if you don't have the budget for thousands of rounds of ammunition, then at least make it consistent. You know, make it 100 rounds a month minimum. And there's also a lot of dry fire drills that you can do. You can literally take the slide off the weapon, unless it's a non-hammer type of weapon. But anywho, I have to print the thing. I was wearing a hat. This is actually not my hair.
Make you healthy, wealthy, and wise.
How are you going to do that, Ken?
Rejuvenation.
Early to bed and early to rise?
No, the early bird.
I think you've mixed
Next up, your proverb. We're gonna clean and adjust your air conditioner.
Rejuvenation.
Last longer. Rejuvenation.
And we're gonna clean the coils the right way, not the easy way.
It makes a huge difference when the coils have been cleaned correctly.
Rejuvenation.
And we're gonna make 6 critical adjustments.
You'll use less energy, stay cool, and increase the life of your system.
Thank you for calling Ghetto. That's right, just $129. Rejuvenation.
GOE-TTL. It'll keep you cool, but it's hard to spell.
Contractor license number 1047-781.
Ghetto.
Can you get it?
What would you do with $1,000? Oh my God. Okay, I will buy a house for each of my friends. Also, $1,000.
He says G-Wagon. It's actually G-Wagon. Gelandewagen. The Mercedes Jeep.
On KFI. Weekdays between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m. and 20 after.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Six in here until 11 p.m. And you know, there's really not any better radio than a guy reading a judge's bench decision, which is why I'm now going to read the 86 pages of Judge Benitez's finding in Virginia Duncan versus Javier Becerra, which I'm not going to do. But anyway, Judge Roger Benitez issued this yesterday. And as I said, the next step is it will go back to the Ninth Circuit Court, who frankly didn't rule that when they bounced it back to Judge Benitez. It's sort of in deference. It's look, you know, this was your case. You know more about it. He's a Bush appointee. He's Southern District of California. In this decision, and I'm going to spare you the 86 pages, he wrote that California's ban unfairly impacts a wide swath of the state's gun owners, as many choose to use magazines containing over 10 rounds for home defense. So here is what he said. Virginia Duncan et al. Plaintiffs versus Javier Becerra in his official capacity as Attorney General of the state of California, defendant. Introduction. As 2 masked and armed men broke in, Susan Gonzalez was shot in the chest. She made it back to her bedroom and found her husband's .22 caliber pistol. Wasting the first rounds on warning shots, she then emptied the single shot pistol at one attacker. Unfortunately, now out of ammunition, she was shot again by the other armed attacker. She was not able to reload or use a second gun. Both she and her husband were shot twice. 42 bullets in all were fired. The gunman fled from the house, but returned. He put his gun to Susan Gonzalez's head and demanded the keys to the couple's truck. When 3 armed intruders carried what looked like semi-automatic pistols broke into the home of a single woman at 3:44 a.m., she dialed 911. No answer. Feng Zhu Shen, dressed in pajamas, held a phone in one hand and took up her pistol in the other hand and began shooting. She fired numerous shots. She had no place to carry an extra magazine and no way to reload because her left hand held the phone with which she was still trying to call 911. After the shooting was over and 2 of the armed suspects got away and 1 lay dead, she did get through to the police. The home security camera video is dramatic. Scenario number 3, by the way. A mother, Melinda Herman, and her 9-year-old twins were at home when an intruder broke in. She and her twins retreated to an upstairs crawl space and hid. Fortunately, she had a .38 caliber revolver. She would need it. The intruder worked his way upstairs, broke through a locked bedroom door and a locked bathroom door, and opened the crawl space door. So Oscar Pistorius would have opened up when the guy kicked down the front door, just breaking away from the judge's decision. Anyway, so the guy is pursuing them. Locked bedroom door, locked bathroom door, opens a crawl space door. Back to the finding, to the judge. The family was cornered with no place to run. He stood staring at her and her 2 children. The mother shot 6 times, hitting the intruder 5 times when she ran out of ammunition. Though injured, the intruder was not incapacitated. Fortunately, he decided to flee. He then turns to the need for self-defense. In 1 year in California, a population of 39 million people, endured 56,609 robberies, numerous, gives the numbers, aggravated assault, residential burglaries, 423 homicides in victims' residences. There were no mass shootings in 2017. Nationally, the first study to assess the prevalence of defensive gun use estimated that there are 2.2 to 2.5 million defensive gun uses by civilians each year. Of those, 340,000 to 400,000 were situations where defenders believed they had almost certainly saved a life by using a gun. Again, we're only on page 2, and I'm not going to read all 86 pages of this. We'll get to the conclusion. But this is a judge making a very compelling and convincing case that limiting, nodding that you have the right to have firearms in your home, but then limiting how many rounds you need to defend yourself without any of those scenarios in mind that I just read, he has found inherently unconstitutional. That because of the Heller decision coming up on a decade ago, that did find and confirm that the Second Amendment allows individuals to own firearms. That in light of that, what he's going to go on and say in the next 84 pages is, then what the hell sense does it make to limit how many rounds someone who chooses to defend their home in this way has available? So more on this here in a little bit. Javier Becerra, the latest from him is that he's going to assess what he's going to do. So asterisk, Monday is April Fool's Day. So I'm going to take everything he says with a grain of salt. But knowing what he knows, that if he appeals, it goes back to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit is made up of actual gun-grabbing communists. So he knows that if it went to the en banc, the full panel of the Ninth Circuit Court, it would this ruling would be overruled. Then there would be an appeal to the Supreme Court where finally, the Supreme Court would say that the Second Amendment allows an individual who can legally own firearms to use a magazine of their own choosing. Does that mean a 10,000 round magazine? Only if you're a moron. Does it mean something that gives you a better than even chance of maybe, if the bad guy's going to bring a gun to a gunfight, least you can do is match him. So his finding when we come back. But what this means basically is the ex post facto, the grandfather, this law that was going to make illegal a piece of property that you have sitting locked in your gun locker right now, that's on hold for now. So I would announce like a flash mob at a local rifle range tomorrow. But in 2019, that's not the most popular thing to do on the radio. And I've grown rather attached to this job. Back right after this, it is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until 11 o'clock. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
Police in Pomona said they were looking for the driver of a car witnessing a dark, newer model, a Dodge Charger. It struck and killed a woman. The woman found.
Yeah, I don't like front sight.
On 8:30 last night at Polk Avenue.
I like a place to shoot north of Santa Clarita. And then I've heard what is it called? High desert shooting, whatever. I've never been there. I have a 25 meter range on my 11 acres, so I'm not really worried. The SR-72, there have been rumors of the SR-72 for 20 years now, that the SR-72 is actually the thing that they call the Aurora project. In all likelihood, the SR-72 is unmanned and probably is exo-atmospheric. It can probably, from a standard ground takeoff, possibly at Mach 6, get close to escape velocity and go into low Earth orbit. But we also, what might have overtaken SR-72 is PGS, is Prompt Global Strike. Prompt Global Strike began under the Bush administration, and what it is a system where an American president, let's say Saddam Hussein is getting a tan on the Tigris, or Kim Jong-un is jet skiing or something. A absolute no shit, legit target. That if we just hit that target, and no collateral damage we can hit, without getting permission from any allies' airspace or refueling or anything like that. So a system would launch from Vandenberg, and it would go anywhere in the world in about 17 minutes, and there would be a hyper-precise kill vehicle that would re-enter, a maneuverable kill vehicle that could not be shot down. And it wouldn't be a nuclear weapon. It would be basically like a 500-pound bomb that would hyper precisely strike, a limousine and a convoy, or whatever. And that's called prompt global strike. Because what Bush discovered in the lead up to the Gulf War, what George H.W. Bush discovered in the lead up to the first Gulf War, is that there were ample opportunities to kill Saddam, but those windows were only like 20 and 30 minutes. And we didn't have a system that could stay on station for 48 hours and wait for Saddam to pull over and take a dump, What? Oh.
Choice.
Top notch.
It's got the hot sheets for you there, dude.
Is there something that I printed on there? I heard it going. I didn't know if I was. Excellent, thank you.
So if that's okay, just let me know and I'll chop it up.
Yeah, no, it's excellent.
All right.
So I should also announce, as long as I have 116 of you, isn't it? Real Genius is one of the best movies of all time. Kent writes his name in his underwear. Wait, what does he say? Kent writes his name in his underwear. Yeah, he does that with his license plate. His mother puts. Wait, what does he say? Your mother put license plates in your underwear? Real Genius, by the way. Double thumbs up. So here's a heads up. So I got 2 domains today. I got waraholics.com and I got pewaholics.com. Pewaholics.com is going to be a California gun-based YouTube channel with like how to and wait, hang on. How long do I have? What? And Waraholics is going to be like a drunk history for military history. So Waraholics and Pewaholics. I can't say pew pew because that guy, Torian Black, whatever his name is, he actually trademarked pew pew. Well, here's the thing. It's not exactly going to be gun videos. We're gonna, because we don't want to get kicked off of YouTube, but we will not give them cause to kick us off. And if they don't, doesn't matter. We'll stream at our own website. So the guy that I'm working with is a long, very successful streaming guy. He does a bunch of stuff for video gaming. He does a bunch of stuff. He does a streaming show for a movie channel. The guy's been doing specifically streaming for a long time.
Save up to 80% by buying Factory Direct, the jewelry exchange manufactures and imports diamonds direct. We have the lowest prices anywhere. Diamond prices have dropped.
So I'm excited because I got a partner to do all the heavy lifting that I'm too lazy to do because I put off a lot of shit. But now this is a guy who is a big fan of KFI, big fan of Dark Secret Place, and he and he is mentally in the space. And I can't say who he is because he's in Hollywood. And Hollywood hates guns unless they're in movies. But no, he's a great guy and a natural partner. So look out for Waraholics very soon. I love Drunk History, but I think they could do a better job with presenting military history in a better way.
Just ask Alexa to play KFI.
Getting KFI station from iHeartRadio.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. And right when you think that the Second Amendment is effectively dead and gone in the state of California, then you get a ruling like we got yesterday out of San Diego. And Judge Roger Benitez, and he overturned Prop 63, which was going to see any of you that had 30 round or greater than 10 round magazines, turn them in. And, in many cases, some guns are even modified so that they will only accept a California compliant 10 round magazine. But a lot of gun manufacturers have to sit there and balance compliance with California with sales in California. And before I get back to some of the things that he said, some basic facts about California. California is still the number one gun market in the world. I mean, America is, but in America, California, believe it or not, California remains the number one gun market in the United States. The largest in the country with the most firearms, believe it or not, in civilian hands, is China. Lots and lots of rural Chinese are allowed to have semi-automatic SKS rifles, and they're expected to also be part of a local workers' collective militia, but many of them have them for self-defense of herds and things like that. But anyway, in America, we have approximately 330 million people, and there's about 360 million guns. It's not all evenly distributed, granted, but believe it or not, here in California, we're still the number one gun market in the country. And disclaimer here, I have a financial interest in a company that makes California compliant AR rifles. The company was moved from Rialto, where Californians were employed doing this. The company was harassed out of the state to Idaho. It was legally harassed by this. Even the federal ATF shook their heads. But happy ending. A bunch of Californians are discovering the 209 area code and the lovely Sawtooth Mountains outside of Boise. So full disclosure. However, anyway, back to my full disclosure, which is also that I'm kind of a big fan of the U.S. Constitution. This is what Judge Benitez says way down on, what is this, page 85 of his 86, or I'm sorry, 82 of his 86 page finding. When he gets into FIOC versus Sunnyvale, he goes through all these California-based decisions. The district court in FIOC found that magazines having a capacity to accept more than 10 rounds are in common use and are therefore not dangerous and unusual. The district court found that it does not matter whether large capacity magazines are commonly used for self-defense, explaining, quote, Second Amendment rights do not depend on how often the magazines are used. Indeed, the standard is whether the prohibited magazines were or are typically possessed by law-abiding citizens, close quote. He goes on. The takings clause goes through that. The definition of keep or take in that one. But bottom line in the state of California, Prop 63 has been overturned, which felt good and sounded good to some of the adults that voted for it, who have believed some of the propaganda about high capacity magazines lead to more mass shootings. But, for those of us who can take a deep breath and calmly discuss the subject, even Michael Bloomberg, who's made it his life's work since he's finished as mayor of New York, to spend his own money getting more gun control in the United States. Even he admits that mass shootings are a tiny percentage, that the majority of shootings are crime-based and very concentrated in American society. Did you know, and you can look up the Uniform Crime Report, this is what the DOJ does, about 4% of the population is responsible for about 51% of the homicides, the majority of those being firearm. So, I mean, you heard me right. About 4% of the population are responsible for approximately 50% of the homicides. But you never hear that. When it peaks, like in Chicago, and handguns illegally possessed by people who don't have a legal right to, felons possessing stolen handguns. That's the disease in Chicago, not legally owned firearms. The last time a private citizen with a legally owned firearm killed anybody in Chicago, homicide. I don't mean self-defense. I mean actual homicide. In the city of Chicago, people who've gone through the trouble of what it takes to legally own a firearm for home defense, the last murder was over 5 years ago. The last time a guy who legally owned a firearm killed his spouse because of cheating or whatever was over half a decade ago. That the majority of gun violence in this country are by people who have no legal right to own the firearms, period. Here's another one. Of the 5,000 plus counties in the United States, if you take the top 27 most homicide-y counties, and I'm talking about Prince George's County, Maryland, 27 homicides per 100,000 citizens. If you take, and that's the number one, if you take the top 30 counties and you leave America with only whatever it is, 4,970, we suddenly have a homicide rate somewhere in the middle of Europe. We suddenly have a homicides per 100,000 of about 0.4, 0.3. So it turns out that firearm violence is extremely concentrated in the United States. What's more remarkable about that low homicide rate, if you take the big offenders, and almost 95% of firearm homicides are perpetrated by someone with no legal right to own the firearm. If you take those out, what's more remarkable, besides the fact that we have a homicide rate putting us somewhere in the middle of the EU, is that unlike the EU, this country is awash in legally possessed firearms. So in other words, firearms don't equal homicide rate. The percentage of homicides committed by legally owned firearms is minuscule compared to the overall homicide rate. Yet it's really easy to blame the guns, or in this case, blame the high capacity magazines. Well, so anyway, for once a legal decision in favor of the Second Amendment happens, and the Prop 63 magazine ban does not take effect until, depending on what the Ninth Circuit Court says. My spidey sense says that that you would have to do a lot of speeding throughout California to find an officer who actually would, after this, obviously, enforce, tag on to your speeding ticket the fact that there's a 30-round magazine in your trunk or whatever. So anyway, some rare good news here in the state of California. And that's the thing. This is the cynical punchline about Gavin Newsom and Javier Becerra, is that none of this stuff stands up to a Supreme Court decision. None of it stands up in front of SCOTUS. It just has to get there. And that's their strategy, is to tire you out, is to run this marathon and just see if the challenge comes and gets it up to SCOTUS. This, when it gets to SCOTUS, Judge Benitez's ruling will be upheld that a magazine capacity ban is unconstitutional, according to the Second Amendment. All right, next hour, the quintessential commando raid. I'll tell you about it when we come back. Also, the latest out of Gaza versus the Israel, that and more on Dark Secret Place, hour number 2. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. What starts with B and ends with M and rhymes with math room?
I think it's a very moderate station. It's not so black and white anymore, like at all. Live, local. KFI. Los Angeles, Orange County.
Wild chase. I'm Michael Chabet, live in the Case File 24-hour newsroom. Authorities in Palmdale say a parolee wanted to resolve the deadly weapon and vandalism led cops on a wild chase before he was arrested. 24-year-old Kyle Goldman was spotted around 4:30 this afternoon by deputies from the Santa Clarita station. Goldman apparently led cops the wrong way on the 14th freeway, tried to run over deputies and/or CHP officers, and did some donuts in the desert. At one point, police said that Goldman slammed head-on into a CHP cruiser while driving the wrong way on the 14. The officer inside had minor injuries. He was brought to you by Mike Diamond, the smell good plumber. 5 Freeway in Burbank's reopened after several hours of closure after a police pursuit. The pursuit started around 7:30 last night. The driver was driving crazy, hitting police cars and others on streets and freeways. He stopped on the freeway in the wrong direction, got out, but that's when an officer-involved shooting happened.
This was one that I haven't seen in quite a while, and just the amount of danger that everybody was in, our officers, the public, because this suspect was ramming innocent bystander vehicles as well.
LAPD's Josh Rubenstein says the driver was arrested. The freeway reopened around 10 o'clock this morning. Sleep disruptions tied to daylight saving time earlier this month may still be lingering for a lot of us.
World Sleep Society sleep expert Dr. Kristen Knudsen says we generally focus on getting enough sleep when we spring forward and fall back, but it's important all year round.
Good quality sleep is made up of duration, should be about 7 to 8 hours per night for most adults, as well as depth and continuity.
Dr. Knudsen says you can get better sleep by turning off your electronic devices at least an hour before you go to bed. Get outside every day to help keep your body clock set, and take a short nap if you get tired during the day. Amy King, KFI News.
Beto O'Rourke has officially started his campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination in El Paso, Texas. O'Rourke said he is proud to start his bid for presidency in his hometown, which he called a city of immigrants and asylum seekers.
Trying to escape brutality,
Have we all noticed that Beto O'Rourke has a weird speaking pace? He's almost like Captain Kirk, trying to flee violence from Central America and crushing poverty. Weird guy.
Charles Lamb died just a few days after he filed his paperwork to run for re-election.
That's what I meant. Bobby O'Rourke. Sounds like an IRA terrorist, doesn't he? But I don't know if it's not Bobby O'Rourke. Bagora. Who was waving his hands around like that? Is it little Bobby O'Rourke? By the way, my source for the story of the Great San Jose Raid would be the exceptional book Commando by James Owen. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. Commando. It's not about how to avoid wearing underwear. It is actually about commandos. Who can identify that knife? What is the name of that knife? Waiting. What is the name? What is the name of that knife? High Desert Drew has it right, but reversed. Fairburn Sykes. And it was modified slightly by General William T. Frederick, the former and leader of the 1st Special Service Force, the 1st American Special Operations Unit in World War II. He modified it slightly, and the American version is called the V-42. Very hard to find an original. But the V-42 was the American version of the Fairburn Sykes fighting knife. Yeah, you can buy them in the U.S. You can buy Fairburn Sykes. Here they'd be called a stiletto or whatever. But no, if you can find a good remake of a V42, then I recommend you do it. Great knives. I've done lengthy research
Sunny and breezy, a little warmer.
on the First Special Service Force.
70s at the beaches, mid 70s to mid and upper 80s for the inland areas. A couple of more clouds and just a little bit cooler by about 2 or 3 degrees on Monday. Inland highs still topping out in the mid 80s. Partly cloudy, cooler Tuesday, high 60s to mid 70s. Next chance of showers comes in late Thursday. Right now 65 in Brea, 62 in Lake Forest, 62 in Maria, 7 in Burbank. We lead local live from the KFI 24-hour newsroom. I'm Michael Chappelle.
Yang Jodong. You know what? The K-bar myth, that's actually a myth. It makes sense, but that's not, it actually, KABAR doesn't stand for Knife Accessory Browning Automatic Rifle. I thought I knew that up and down for 20 years. It's not true. All right, I have to do a radio show. Perhaps you've heard of it. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian suits in here until 11 p.m. And this hour, the greatest commando raid of all time, fulfilling all the criteria, which is bold, daring, courageous, and the piece of resistance. Can it make a strategic difference? So the quintessential successful commando raid. Some housekeeping items to get out of the way. I don't know why they didn't have more of a discussion about this before, but the Pentagon's Inspector General confirmed on Wednesday that it has launched an investigation of Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan. Well, look at that, Patrick Shanahan, on whether he has made decisions overly favorable to his former employer. Perhaps you've heard of them, Boeing. Or people I know who work there, the Lazy Bee Ranch. A spokesman, and by the way, they identify him as airline industry giant, Boeing. But you'll find that Boeing is also a defense industry giant. So there's that. A spokeswoman for Acting Inspector General Glenn Fine released a statement saying that the watchdog, quote, has decided to investigate complaints that we recently received that Acting Secretary Shanahan allegedly took actions to promote his former employer, Boeing, and disparage its competitors, allegedly in violation of ethics rules. In his Senate Armed Services Committee testimony, Acting Sec Shannon stated that he supported an investigation into these allegations. We have informed him that we are for him, sir. We have opened this investigation. And this is the danger in appointing somebody like Shanahan, who's a smart guy, cut his teeth in Boeing commercial, and he's bounced back and forth between Boeing military, Boeing defense, Boeing space, and commercial. The problem is you can paint any decision he makes as partisan, biased towards his former employer, or whatever. It does open a huge can of worms with the defense industry and government, and that is the incest that goes on. The cross-pollination that happens between professional civilian in the Pentagon, uniformed professional in the Pentagon, and the civilian defense industry. I mean, I would never favor any sort of legal prevention or bar from bouncing in retirement from uniform to suit and tie into the industry. I never would, because that's part of the reason it's effective, is when they get a retired pilot who knows his S, but he's afraid to say out loud when he's in uniform, what should be happening or whatever. It's just, there's a lot of valuable feedback and experience that comes out of uniform into defense, or from the professional, the GS, the government service pay scale, like Robert Gates, who's a career government guy. Gates was probably in the last 50 years, you'd point to Robert Gates as the quintessential professional government leader and administrator. CIA or defense, Gates was very, very effective, and it's really hard to find a word against the guy. So Shanahan is appointed, former Boeing guy, So he brings expertise about the industry there. But then things happen like what happened in the last Air Force budget. And that is with the F-35 production going great guns, going full speed. Possibility even that maybe India does a 180 and buys the F-35. The opportunities that are involved with Turkey probably not being able to complete their order because we don't like them anymore, even though they're a NATO country. But so the F-35 is at this point probably succeeding better than Lockheed Northrop thought it would, in all honesty, with plenty of orders on the table and probably the tactical standard for NATO air forces for the next 25 years. Everybody but the Germans. The French we understand, because the French have to protect their national industry, their national aerospace industry. So Dassault is going to continue making the Rafale and various Mirages or whatever. The French don't want to put a wooden stake in the heart of their indigenous national combat aircraft industry. Also with shipbuilding. Okay, they're just not going to do that. The Germans have done that. The Germans have been buying other people's fighters for a long time. But they won't buy the F-35. The Germans are the one NATO nation that's not buying them. Norway, they're in the air in Norway. The Brits have the naval version and the Air Force version. The Italians, they're making F-35s in Italy. Everyone but the Germans. The Germans won't buy it. They're going to look for something else. It's not a stealth fighter, but screw them. So the F-35 is going to be it. Problem is, Boeing doesn't make it. And any Secretary of Defense who did not continue to send defense aviation work to Boeing would be effectively signing their death warrant. Now, we've been through this, by the way, with the ship and the submarine industries, that the shipyard that makes our submarines was on life support a couple years ago. You just can't sit there stringing along one submarine in the dock for 4 years. At some point, you have to finish it and then start a new one and all that. As a national asset, we will not allow the sub-industry to ever go out of business. The naval ship architecture and building industry go out of business. And now that we're effectively down to 2 companies that make fighters, we're not going to allow one of them to go out of business or to merge. And in this case, it would be Boeing. 15, 20 years ago, Boeing was it before the F-22 decision and all that. 20 years later, Lockheed Northrop got the F-22 and they got the F-35. Boeing had a different Joint Strike Fighter. It looked like a whale shark. And some say that it would have been a better choice, but that's moot, right? So what happened in the latest budget was that $1.7 billion was allotted for the new F-15, which is a Boeing product. All of you, I know you're in Long Beach, you're rolling your eyes because your dad or your mom worked at this company called McDonnell Douglas. And McDonnell Douglas made the F-15 in St. Louis, and McDonnell Douglas made the C-17 in Long Beach. But McDonnell Douglas is now Boeing. So there's that. I know. It's weird calling an F-18 the Boeing F-18. When I was in Navy ROTC, it was the McDonnell Douglas F-18. Now it's the Boeing F-18. That's just the way it is. But there was a time in the years succeeding World War II in the late 40s and 50s that the United States would greenlight absolutely every fighter that came along. It seemed like it. You really had to design a complete POS for it not to be funded. Everything got funded because there were probably 15 independent tactical aircraft companies that you've never heard of to this day. Anyone heard of Vought? Well, Vought made the Corsair, the iconic Corsair in World War II. And eventually they merged with Ling and Temco and became LTV, Ling Temco Vought. And all those companies distilled down into 2 companies that make fighters. And it's such a precarious way of life that one company got the stealth fighter, the F-22, over 20 years ago. 20 years later, they also won the Joint Strike Fighter, which would be another generational plane. And that happened to be the same company. The other company is SOL, that'd be Boeing. So, Boeing got a life ring. Boeing had a line thrown to it, and it was several years worth of F-15s. By the way, Boeing's not doing that bad, no matter what you're hearing, no matter what any radio host declares. Boeing's not dead. Boeing's not even on life support. Boeing's not even limping a little bit. Boeing has 4,600 orders for the 737 MAX 8. That's just that. Those are the facts. But Boeing balances the commercial sheets with military contracts and space contracts and all that. The space contracts sometimes help out the commercial. But Boeing is doing great. It's just that making tactical aircraft in St. Louis is way different than making 737s in Renton. So it just so happens that the acting SecDef was a former Boeing executive, and he made a decision to keep a company that makes fighters in business. And it just happened to be the company that he left. So anyway, there's going to be a investigation. All right, when we come back, Iran's drug czar is in a jail cell in Sri Lanka, and wait till you hear why. Right after this, it is a Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until 11 p.m. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chapay with the news.
As Brian was mentioning earlier, Gun Magazine holding 10 bullets. Several judges released.
So here at 9:15 for sure.
Decision blocking the law that barred California gun owners from possessing so-called high-capacity magazines. Southland gas prices keep going up. Gallon of self-serve regular LA County rose more than a penny today.
You wanna look up the best looking helicopter of all time? It would be the Lockheed AH-56 Cheyenne. Best looking helicopter that we never made. The Lockheed Cheyenne. Amazing machine.
This afternoon, red light service was disrupted for a time for that rescue.
Well, you know what? Your segment seems short. See what I did there? Sorry, I was talking to my YouTube peeps. Hey, Brian Suits here for SolarMax. SolarMax Technology are powering my house, and boy, did they today. By noon, I was pouring power back on the grid. You can do that when it's sunny, when it's lovely and sunny out. You're all driving by to go see the poppies. I'm making electricity. But there's a cloud on the horizon. You may have heard that utility companies recently stopped their solar rebate programs, not SolarMax. SolarMax Technology is so committed to making solar affordable for everyone. They're making up for the lost utility savings with the Solar for All rebate, but you got to get in on it by tomorrow. Through the end of March, SolarMax's Solar for All rebate, combined with federal tax incentives, gives you one last chance to get historic savings up to 35% off. That means an average of $7,500 off your deal. When it is on your roof, they flip a switch. You're making electricity. You're now saving on a monthly basis to your utility. I saw an immediate change. And now I've seen an even bigger change. They can make this offer because they're the only solar company with in-house financing. And by the way, they should say in factory, because it's not a house. It's a factory in Riverside. It's a factory where their world-class roofers and designers install and design your system. And then, oh, by the way, they make the panels there in Riverside. That means maximum savings. No one's taking a trip down to San Pedro to get a Connex full of Chinese panels. They're just packing Riverside panels into the truck and slapping them on your California house. So don't miss your chance to save up to $7,500 on solar. Dial pound 250 on your cell phone now and say SolarMax, pound 250, say SolarMax, or visit solarmaxtech.com and take your time, read the deets. Subject to credit approval, CSLB number 9072048.
Mid-70s all the way to mid-upper 80s for the inland areas. Crash clearing now in Commerce on the 710.
That's going to be on the 710 northbound side just before the 5. That crash finally made its way to the right shoulder. Traffic has recovered in that.
Yeah, Gavin's probably pooing himself.
San Rafael Avenue, a broken down car blocking the right lane. Traffic slows as you approach.
It's wider, bigger, and faster than in Apache. The Cheyenne had a pusher propeller. Not only did it have the main rotor and the tail rotor, it had a pusher prop. So the thing could crack 250 miles an hour. But it was so big and so expensive that the idea that you were going to be able to make 2,000 of them for a ground war, a defense of West Germany, it just wasn't going to happen.
I'm Tony Gold. 20 years ago, when my mom had lung cancer,
Technically, there were helicopters in World War II.
today you
And the Germans did have gyrocopters. Well, the Sikorsky R4 actually did debut technically during World War II, and it actually was in service as a sub chaser.
Nobody thinks about home insurance until disaster strikes, and that's when things really hit the fan. And are you sure your home insurance policy will cover the things you need the most? 64% of U.S. homes are underinsured with outdated policies. Hippo is smart insurance. It covers things you really need, and you have. Computer equipment, appliances, HVAC systems, even your TV. And Hippo does it for up to 25% less than what you're currently paying. Go to myhippo.com, answer a few simple questions, and you can do this in 60 seconds or less, and you'll see how much they can save you. Hippo has $200 billion in assets, and they'll help you switch at any time. You don't even have to wait for your current policy to expire. So, for modern, up-to-date home insurance for less, go to myhippo.com/handle, myhippo.com/handle. That's myhippo.com/handle.
It's a great time to head to Ralph's and save on your essentials at the Buy 5 Save 5 event. Just choose from a huge selection of participating items, and when you buy only 5, you'll save $5 instantly at checkout with card. You'll find hot deals on select varieties of Doritos, caramel cereal, Swiffer wet sauce, Tide detergent, and more. Just visit Ralphs.com or the app for details.
Jan Michael Vincent just died like 2 weeks ago, right?
Fresh food, low prices at Ralph's. If you're looking for smart ways to stretch your budget, head to Ralph's for the big 4-day sale. It's happening now through Sunday. Just bring your rewards card and you can take home hot deals like sweet, juicy personal watermelons for only $1.50 each. And select varieties of kettle chips are just $1.99 at the 4-day sale. Plus, you'll find savings on meat, produce, snacks, and more. Visit Ralphs.com.
How much time?
Details. Fresh food, low prices at Ralph's.
Springtime is the time to buy a new Polaris. Right now, best-selling off-road lineup is priced to move. Get more done with a hard-working See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet, never drink and ride. Selfless service is the guiding principle that drives Army National Guard soldiers to be always ready whenever disaster strikes. They are your next-door neighbors and your colleagues in school.
Trying to find some groovy late 60s
Ready to serve at all
psychedelia.
and for country. To learn more, log on to nationalguard.com or contact an Army National Guard recruiter in your area. Sponsored by the California Army National Guard. Aired by the California Broadcasters Association at this station. Prescription products require an online physician consultation and are only available if the physician determines a prescription is appropriate. See website for full details.
Hey guys, good news. The expensive little blue pill is now generic, which means you can get the prescription medication to treat ED at affordable prices. And now get your first month supply for just $5 at 4hims.com/jack. Hims connects you with real doctors online who can prescribe the medication. And a pharmacy sends it right to your door. So easy. To get your first order for just $5, you need to go to 4hims.com/jack. That's 4hims.com/jack.
May not be stomach issues. No matter what I did, they never went away. Doctor, and get really
I'm going with Fool in the Rain.
We discovered that exercise deficiency, or EPI, may be the reason for my stomach issues.
I'd love to do Hendrix, but only if you can tell me in what capacity did he serve in the U.S. Army.
symptoms just don't go away.
James Marshall Hendricks was drafted, served in the U.S. Army. What was he?
Break it down for your doctor and get specific about
Yeah, sure. Lots of people are in the 82nd Airborne.
EPI.com to learn more and use the symptom checker to help change the conversation with your doctor. Brought to you by Apple.
Parachuter?
Moving American style.
Yeah, he was a 11 Bravo. He was a rifleman, airborne. He was a airborne infantryman. 82nd Airborne. Garfield High School, Seattle, Washington.
Okay. Alright, okay.
I actually like that. I was reduced to my basic animal form. Listen and follow on the iHeartRadio app or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. What do you do?
Nobody was a lefty.
I would buy 14 7-layer burritos. Also a tank of gas for like 6 of my friends, depending on the gas station. Look, it's not going to change your life, but all you got to do is send a text. So listen for the cue to text weekdays between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m. for your chance to win a grand KFI.
KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place in one of my moods with the Zeppelin. And by the way, if you go to the YouTube channel, you can just go to unsheepyourself.com. Unsheepyourself.com. You can get to my YouTube channel where we're streaming live right now, but also take my daughter up to Carrizo Plain. For all you amateurs that are out there looking at California poppies right now, the pros are up at Carrizo Plain, just west of Maricopa, because it is Bureau of Land Management land, BLM land. So you can just camp anywhere, unless it's marked. All right, so two things. First of all, in the irony department, there was a seizure of 107 kilograms of heroin packed in fertilizer bags in the Sri Lankan port of unpronounceable name here, Bandaranaike, anyway. And there were 8 crewmen. They skived off from the boat. They went to the local Hilton Hotel in Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka, formerly Ceylon. However, when the Colombo police arrived at the hotel, they found that the suspects had checked out earlier and were headed now for the international airport. And so, 10 minutes later, the Colombo police, the capital of Sri Lanka, Colombo, of course, made it to the airport where they arrested Mohammed Masood Zahirian and Mohammed Bakhshandeh, Iranian citizens. They pinged those names off of the Iranian embassy in Sri Lanka, and they said, we have 2 of your citizens in our custody here. Can you confirm that they are Iranians? And the Iranian embassy confirmed not only that Mohammed Masood Zahirian was an Iranian, they confirmed that Mohammed Bakhshandeh was also Iranian. Oh, by the way, Zahirian, he's Brigadier General Mohammed Masood Zahirian, and he would be the Iranian anti-narcotics police chief. And his wingman, his Major Healy, Colonel Mohammed Bakhshandeh, he would be Tehran's anti-narcotics chief. Were they doing some deep research into how to ship heroin to Iran? No, they're not. It turns out in Farsi, anti-narcotics means buy narcotics and take them to Europe. Because these were the guys complaining a few years ago that American sanctions were preventing the Iranians from getting the equipment that they need to fight drugs or blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out under direction of the Iranian government, there has been a campaign, and this has been a pretty thinly veiled campaign. The Iranians literally pick up raw, uncut heroin out of Malaysia, out of Burma, or whatever you're calling it these days, and out of Thailand. And they physically ship it along the world's busiest shipping lines to Europe, generally to Naples, where the Camorro crime gang, who are practically a branch of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, distributes the heroin. These are actual on-the-record statements from 2006 from the once Prosecutor General of Iran about exporting heroin specifically to Europe. He said, quote, if Europe takes any action against the Islamic regime, drug smuggling to Europe would intensify. The drugs will transit from Central Asian countries to Europe via the Iranian air and sea borders. Close quote. In recent years, regime-run newspapers such as Resalat have echoed his threats and called for, quote, this is transliterated from Farsi, from Iranian newspapers directly into English. Quote, the dispatching of concentrated and pure heroin to European countries in order to avenge the blood of young Muslim martyrs from sissy European youths. The explicit wording of the Quran states that if they sting you, sting them back twice. We must always put blasphemers in their place, and we should terrorize young European sissies as payback for the blood of our Islamic martyrs. Close quote. So there you go. It's an actual official stance of theirs. All right, when we come back, a blast from the past. I'll retell the story of the Saint-Nazaire raid, 1942, the most successful commando raid of all time. Dark Secret Place, Brian Suits in here until 11 KFI, AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
The father of missing 8-year-old boy from Corona bought drain-clearing acid, bolt cutters, gloves, and trash bags.
Bryce McIntosh has been charged with the murder and torture of 8-year-old.
Isn't that story out of Corona is just absolutely unimaginable. This is, not the stepfather, but the father of that 8-year-old boy handcuffs him, ties his ankles, and puts him in a bathtub full of ice until he freezes to death because it would be silent. And the boy is sitting there asking his father, while he had consciousness, why he was hurting him. So his sister and his mother heard that, did nothing, but he is sitting there freezing his own son to death. And then he uses, cable cutters to dismember the body and dissolves him with acid. What do you mean the Entebbe guy? You mean Rafi Eitan? Nate in SoCal. What do you mean Entebbe guy? Because Rafi Eitan was the Adolf Eichmann guy. Oh, you mean the Air France pilot? Yeah, the Air France pilot who told his crew when the terrorists were splitting the Europeans and non-Israelis and Jews and separating them, he told his crew, "We're not flying back to France. We're staying with these passengers." Yeah. The guy had big balls. He also was, as a young guy, he had some work with the French underground, the French resistance. Which if everybody who claimed to be a member of the French resistance really was, the Germans would have been kicked out of France in about a week. But the French are liars.
Why would a plumber just tell me what it costs to unclog my drain over the phone? Is it that complicated?
No, it's not. It makes no sense at all. They obviously have a price.
Whoa, you've got a nice aroma. Who are you?
Mike Diamond, the smell good plumber.
Will you tell me how much to unstop my drain?
$99.
But you haven't seen it.
Don't need to. Doesn't matter if it's a kitchen sink or a mainline sewer stoppage. The smell good plumbers at Mike Diamond will unclog almost any drain for $99.
Almost.
Yeah, there are a few exceptions, but you can read all about them on our website before you call. Just go to thesmellgoodplumber.com.
Wow, you're like up front and everything. I just called a guy named Bubba who wouldn't tell me.
Hey, no spoiler alerts.
Just professional plumbers who show up on time, smell good, and unclog drains for $99. Call us 1-800-446-MIKE. Contractor license number 399170.
SoCal weather from KFI is going to be mostly clear, lows in the 50s. Tomorrow's highs under sunny skies, 70s at the beach, mid-70s to mid and upper 80s inland. Wind gusts 20 miles an hour. We lead local, live from the KFI 24-hour newsroom. I'm Michael Chappé.
Message and data rates may apply.
If you're considering going back to school, ask yourself the following questions. You need the flexibility to take classes on your schedule.
What's that?
You need transfers. Want to earn a quality degree from a world-renowned university? If you answered yes to any of these questions, Arizona State University is the perfect school for you. Arizona State University offers highly ranked degree programs.
You can't see the face I make when I sneeze.
Habits from wherever you are on your schedule. Plus, ASU Online accepts
information, text school to 35517. Learn for yourself why the Wall Street Journal ranks ASU fifth in the nation for producing the best qualified graduates, and why 87% of ASU grads are recruited within 90 days of graduation. Learn to grow, learn to succeed, and learn to thrive at Arizona State University. ASU online. School to 35517. That's SCHOOL.
I got to go back to the 40s for a little Glenn Miller, American Patrol. See, he's kind of making fun of it only being $1,000. KFI M640, more stimulating talk. Well, that music means only one thing, that we're going back to World War II, or Whiskey Whiskey Deuce, as it was called officially by FDR. Of course, this song, Glenn Miller's American Patrol, really nothing to do with the story that I'm about to tell you. The most successful commando raid of all time, called Operation Chariot. And it was an all-English operation in March of 1942. So a quick backstory. Commando and commandos are a Winston Churchill invention of World War II. As Britain was on its heels after the Battle of Britain, succeeding in defeating the Luftwaffe, preventing invasion of Britain, Churchill nevertheless had to begin showing some wins. The badly kept secret was that the British Army left a lot of its equipment in France when they skived off at Dunkirk, and hundreds of thousands actually made it back to Britain. But artillery, tanks, things like that, they were woefully short on that. And that means they would be short on victories against the Nazis, and things would look dim for the British people. So it was at this point that Churchill, even before then, recalling his own service in the Boer War, recalled that the Dutch descendants of South Africa, called Boers, had tremendous success in striking British supply lines and behind the lines facilities, headquarters, with small units that the Boers called commandos with a K. And Churchill said, they punched way above their weight. I know I was there. They captured me, but I escaped. And he said, this is what we need, is a way where at a time and place of our choosing, from the dark of the night, from the depths of the ocean, Britishmen, Englishmen can come ashore with pointy knives and they can kill Nazis, and it will strike fear into the Nazis' hearts. So the British underwent a tremendous revolution in thinking, and they created special forces, basically. And they also created a way to train and select people to become special forces. And that was not the end of the battle. The next step was, okay, now what? And so the British had several hits and misses. Some of them absolutely disastrous, but others pretty good. The British raided a Norwegian fish oil factory in Vegsø on the coast of Norway. They went in, they blew it up, they left. They lost a lot of guys, but the point was, the overall point of the victory, the psychological effect, was worth the lives lost. Next thing the British did was they identified the German version of radar, which was still called RDF, radio direction finding. They identified at Bruneval, France, a station where there was a lightly guarded German radar site. And the British couldn't believe their luck. And so they parachuted some chaps in. They overcame the fat sausage-eating German guards, who were actually a little more alert than anyone thought they would be. But they nevertheless overcame the guys, disassembled the Würzburg radar, brought it back to Britain. Astounding success. Couldn't exactly be front page news because so much of it was classified. So then the next thing that Churchill suggested was a strategic problem that Britain had. Again, Britain's alone. America's not in the war. This is late. This is mid 1941. And the Bismarck is old business. Bismarck has been at the bottom of the North Sea now for nearly a year. But its sister ship, the Tirpitz, was in Norway. And the only dry dock on the entire Atlantic coast that could service that ship, because big ships like that, when they get hit, damaged, whatever, they need a dry dock. You drive them in there, you lock the back gate, you pump out the water, and now it's high and dry, you can fix it. The only one was in the French city, the now occupied French city of Saint-Nazaire. And the British commando headquarters said, here's the thing. If we take out that one dry dock that was built in 1932, the world's largest dry dock, built in 1932, if we destroy that thing, then Tirpitz has to leave the Atlantic. It has to go back to Germany to get fixed. So this is strategic. In other words, would you send 20 men to go kill Hitler? Would you send 100 men? If you decided that it would end the war by a month or a year, would you kill Hitler? Would you sacrifice 100 men? Would you sacrifice 1,000 men? The honest answer is you should be prepared to sacrifice 10,000 men to shorten the war because of the math. And so they came up with a plan. And the plan was, we're going to destroy the dry dock. We're going to send hundreds of Royal Marine Commandos and other chaps. And we're going to do it by taking an old American destroyer that was lent to us for this war. It's a World War I destroyer. It was called the USS Buchanan. We've renamed it the HMS Campbelltown. And it's absolutely worthless. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to pack it full of explosives, and we're going to drive it into that dry dock. And we're going to destroy it. Once it's destroyed, Tirpitz cannot risk being damaged because it can't go to that dry dock anymore. And it's now out of the war. So that was a plan. How was it executed? How did it become the most successful commander raid in time, of all time? I'll tell you about Operation Chariot and how it was executed right after this on the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here till 11 KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news. So yeah, waraholics.com. If you've ever seen Drunk History, and I know through my friend Lauren Savon, who's been on Drunk History several times, I know Derek Waters, and he's given me his blessing for this. But so I got waraholics.com, and waraholics.com is going to be basically like Drunk History for military history. So it'll be irreverent yet reverential. So it'll be irreverent reverent. It'll be unreverent. Yeah, I know hardcore history, but it's a little like too heavy. By the way, Terry Shepard is definitely going to be involved. My friend Angry Tom Bigley is going to be involved. Yes, I'm on Kennedy on Tuesday at 6 p.m. I'm on Kennedy on Fox Business. But yeah, Terry Shepard definitely will be part of the action. And then we might do live tapings at Bravery Brewing, by the way. It's a natural, depending on whether or not they sponsor it, which I think they should. But Waraholics is going to be like... is going to be that kind of a thing. Because the best thing, here's the thing, in my view, the best kind of podcasts and things like that are ones that are kind of quick and dirty. 10 minutes, 20, 30 minutes. If you want to do 5 parts, 20-minute parts, that's better than doing an hour and a half. So, by the way, Coyote Dog update. Lucille is working out just fine. She's working out great, and I can't. We've had so many border collies. I love border collies. Once you have border collies, you can't get another kind of dog. But so we got this border collie coyote hybrid, and she's just insanely smart. I mean, it's really scary how smart she is. I've never seen a dog, see something once and then not have to relearn it. How much time? By the way, I know, and we have gone through some super smart border collies, but this dog, this coyote border collie hybrid, makes those dogs look like fucking pugs. By the way, for you history buffs, the bumper for the San Nazaire raid is going to be Time Bomb by Rancid. Huh? I have to make this tight and bright too because I don't have a lot of time before the end of the hour. So, by the way, next hour the case of the missing admiral. Yeah, Wyatt, our 3-footed dog, he is a Aussie Shepherd Border Collie. And now that he has someone the same age, his stump on his right rear foot, we have to get a prosthetic. And it needs to be like a cup that can cinch around that foot because he's actually injuring it. He's got 3 feet, he's got 4 legs but 3 feet, and he is injuring his stump. So if anyone knows or has a suggestion, I used to have doggy snowshoes for my dogs, but those are for dogs with full paws. He's missing just the actual paw. His right rear leg ends right at that joint. But he loves his new friend. That's all they do. That is all they do is just play all day long and chase the horse. So that's cool. By the way, the Algerian army is urging the President Abdulaziz Bouteflika that he be declared unfit. The guy's been in charge of Algeria forever. And he ran one of the most brutal counterinsurgencies in the 80s and 90s and up to this day against Islamic insurgents in Algeria. The irony being, if you know anything about the Algerian Civil War, they were the insurgents that got the French to finally give up and leave Algeria. Then they turned around and had Islamic insurgents and they had a scorched earth counterinsurgency policy. It was crazy. And they just kicked out all the foreign press, so you've never heard of it. But for 20 years, there were like 1.8 million dead in a nation of only like 35 million. But anyway, the army's throwing him out with the bathwater. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until 11. Next hour, the case, the World War II case of the missing admiral. A head scratcher. All right, so talking about March 28th, 1942, the most successful commando raid of all time. And the criteria being identify a strategic weakness, come up with a plan to exploit it, succeed, and then watch the chips fall where they may. And that was a raid on the occupied French port of Saint-Nazaire. And the British decided, here's what we're going to do. We need to destroy a dry dock there. We need to ram the gate of the dry dock. But wait, there's more. We're going to do it with an obsolete ship, the former USS Buchanan, now the HMS Campbelltown. And we're going to impale the gate, the destroyer on the gate. Royal Marine Commandos are going to come off of smaller ships, and they're going to wreak havoc. They're going to blow up pump houses, U-boat pens, all this other stuff. And the secret is that there's going to be a compartment in that ship that's impaling the dry dock that the Germans won't know about. There will be a secret compartment laden with explosives, and it will be delayed 2 hours. And so the battle will be over, and the Germans will be high-fiving and enjoying tea and bratwurst and beer and bratwurst, and the thing's going to go up, and it's going to take everybody with it and the dry dock. Great plan. But here's a problem. The dry dock was at the estuary, the mouth of the Loire River, and it was 6 miles up the river. It wasn't a direct shot from the ocean. So they had to modify the destroyer, HMS Campbelltown, to make it look like a Nazi destroyer. And they had to just pray at 2 a.m. as they went up that estuary that the Nazis would be befuddled and they would hesitate firing because it would look too much like a German ship. And then, oh, by the way, 30 miles off the coast, they hauled down the ensign and they put up the German naval jack. So it was actually flying a German flag on the way in. Furthermore, they had the RAF do a distraction raid near Saint-Nazaire to make it so that everyone would be looking up. But a very alert and clever German officer realized that a lot of the planes weren't dropping bombs, and they seemed to be just buzzing around. They looked a little too much like a distraction. Then on the horizon, in the flashes of the anti-aircraft fire, they see this destroyer and some other escort ships coming up the Loire. They're about a mile away from the dry dock, and the Germans begin challenging the ship. And the bridge of the ship answers back and says, we're a friendly, don't fire on us. And then they haul down the German flag and they raise the ensign. They raise the British naval ensign. So now everybody knows the jig is up. We are who we are. We're not spies. We are a British ship. The Germans begin firing heavily at the Campbelltown. At this point, by the way, the Campbelltown's crew fire a German flare in the air, which means friendly fire, stop shooting. That actually buys them another minute. Some of the Germans cease fire. So the Campbelltown now is doing 19 knots, and it's headed right at the dry dock. Other smaller ships have beached, and Royal Marine Commandos are getting off. And at approximately 2:22 a.m. or so, the Campbelltown hits the dry dock, drives up on the gate. The gate is destroyed now, and the ship isn't going anywhere. Intense fire is being traded between the now doomed ship, the intentionally doomed ship, and German troops. It's complete disarray for most of the commandos They've never been in combat. But then again, the Germans, the 333rd Infantry Division, most of these young chaps haven't been at war either. And there's intermixing, there's hand-to-hand combat. Some British officers, one guy in particular who actually spent a lot of time in Germany in the 30s, was captured by 3 German sentries. One of the sentries said, should we just kill him? And he understood. And he said back in German, you can't kill me, I'm a very important prisoner. And he gave them his compass and his watch. And as they were leading him back to a prison holding area, he ran into some British chaps and they overcame the sentries. The sentries ran away. So anyway, they're holding their position. One thing that all these men did not know was that Lord Louis Mountbatten has said to the commander, I doubt if one of you will return. So there's over 600 Brits that are now on the ground running around Saint-Nazaire, total chaos, trying to blow stuff up. The Royal Marines brought explosives, but they know something that the Nazis don't know, and that is in 2 hours, this ship is going up and is taking all of you with it. So anyway, the battle takes about an hour and a half before all the commandos are either wounded or dead or captured. The Germans begin rolling them up in 2s and 3s, sending them back to hospitals. And one of the things about this is that the Germans, and the British remarked on this, the Germans took really good care of the British wounded. The Germans treated these men with great honor and respect, but they were still prisoners. War is over for you guys. Für Sie, der Krieg ist vorbei. For you, the war is over. So they're collecting them into hospitals and prisoner pens and things like that. So these men are dribbling in onesies and twosies, and they're looking at each other, and they're not saying anything. Because they all know that the Campbelltown was supposed to have exploded around 4 a.m. But it hasn't exploded yet. And the captain, the one-way captain, Captain Beatty, is now captured. And it's 10 a.m. and the Campbelltown hasn't exploded. And the Germans begin interrogating these prisoners, saying, what did you think was going to happen here? You don't think we can just repair a gate on the dry dock? Are you serious? What the hell was your goal here? We rule the seas in Europe, and the Japanese rule in the Pacific, said one interrogator to a British sergeant who responded, yeah, you rule the bottom half. Wank, wank. So the Captain Beatty, is being interrogated at 11:59. And the interrogator says, what was the point of this? It's useless. You've squandered hundreds of your men's lives. And at that moment, as he asks that question, the Campbelltown's explosives go off. On the deck of the Campbelltown, dozens of Nazi generals and local civilians, local VIPs, German VIPs, dozens of generals and high-ranking Nazis were on the deck of the Campbelltown inspecting this great German victory when it went up with a gigantic mushroom cloud. 360 Germans were killed when it went up. More importantly, strategically, the dry dock was destroyed and was never repaired during the war. The German ship Tirpitz never got to use it. It was eventually taken care of by bombs. But the RAF checked that dock for 4 years running. 3 years running. The Germans never repaired it. Such was the damage. This is why it is considered the quintessential commando raid, because it was a strategic victory. The Germans didn't recover from it. And was it worth several hundred lives? It was. The men were all volunteers. They all knew it was a one-way trip. They got a one-way trip. But they are honored in British Special Operations, and for that matter, American Special Operations, as being an extraordinarily brave crew of chaps, knowing what they got into and succeeding far beyond, actually, what they thought they would. In fact, Hitler was so furious, he fired his commander in the West. He fired the general in charge of the occupation of France for just allowing this to happen. Hitler fired this guy. So you prevent the dry dock from being used, you cause complete disarray in the German high command, and you piss off Hitler. That is a successful commando raid. Next hour, the missing admiral, and what are we trying to get out of these 40-year-old F-15s for our buck? That and more coming up. Hour number 3 of the Dark Secret Place right after this. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Alrighty, final questions? Alrighty, thanks for streaming. I gotta power up the battery.